All right, welcome everybody to our Plantsman's Tour at the JC Raulston Arboretum. If anybody doesn't know, I'm Mark Weathington. I'm director here of the Arboretum. And this is always, we do these programs in advance. So we're here in early December, and I had suggested, back sometime in probably late summer that we always do fall color. It's too early. We don't have any fall color. It's still summer for us, even though we think it's going to be fall. So let's push it back because we usually have more fall color when we're really thinking winter in December. And we did up until, a couple 20-some degree nights. But there's still a lot of fall color out there. So we'll go through, we'll talk about that. A word first about fall color. There's always, these things in the news. Is it going to be a good fall color year up in the north? Is it not going to be a good fall color? It's pretty simple. What trees need for fall color in general is clear days, lots of sun, clear days, and cool nights. That's why in the South we don't get great fall color typically. And that's a generalization. There are a lot of different factors, but the big things are clear days and cool nights. So that's why the Northeast gets good fall color typically, because they have both of those things. That's why the Pacific Northwest doesn't get as good fall color, because they often don't have clear days, even if they have cool nights. So it's those kind of factors. Now, there is a reason why we still have fall color right now, even though it's very late and we've had some cold days. And there's a reason why some things are completely dormant and have done their thing. And that's because plants start their change to fall color typically for two main reasons. One is that they are light sensitive. So when the days get shorter, they start shutting down. They know that means the season's ending. I use no, they're not really don't know, but they react to the days shortening, so short nights. And that's why, the whole thing with poinsettias about putting them in closets and taking them out, what you're doing is tricking their light senses, and that's how that works. Then there are plants that really respond to temperature change. So some of the things we'll see today maybe are more responding to temperature change, because we've been pretty warm this fall. So they're really responding to that. We had just enough cool nights that we're kind of in between that. So it's a little of this, a little of that. But those are kind of, if you want to know, kind of the big reasons why, the big reasons how fall color happens. Another thing I want to mention when we talk about fall color, leaves do not actually change color so much as colors are revealed. The reds, especially the reds, less so the yellows, reds are there in the leaf all the time. Those anthocyanins are there. They're masked by chlorophyll. And there's some people who will tell you that, insects that feed on chlorophyll and they won't like purple leaf plants. That's actually not true, because those anthocyanins are in plastids in the plant, and chlorophyll is in the chloroplasts. And so when you have purple leaf plants, ones that have purple leaves, like purple leaf plums, they have chlorophyll in those leaves as well. So anything that wants chlorophyll as part of their diet, it gets those. And it just so happens that chlorophyll breaks down and is kind of reabsorbed, those chemicals back into the tree. And so they kind of disappear, and then you get the fall color. And that's often why the outside of trees will start, it'll still be green on the interior, and you'll have the outsides turning color, and then that slowly goes in as the outer leaves start falling. Any questions about that? I kept that as far from actual science as I could, because then I'm bound to say something wrong if I get too deep into the science. So with that, we're going to get going on some plants that have great fall color. Our first plant, if you read our e-updates, I think I wrote about this last month. When I was looking out my office window over there thinking I needed to write about a plant for our e-update, and I was like, oh great, this is in full fall color. This is the great common name of fleshy fruited spindle tree. You know, what can you do? Euonymus carnosus. And most people who know Euonymus know it either as burning bush if they came from up north, one of the most popular plants, or was in like Chicago and areas like that, gets brilliant red fall color, has kind of winged stems. It's a shrubby plant, and it seeds everywhere up there and has become a real nuisance. Or if they're farther south, they probably know Euonymus as a ground covering, creeping, kind of vining plant that'll grow up trees that a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with. But there are a lot of Euonymus that don't fit into either of those categories. This is a deciduous tree. Now, a lot of the Euonymus or the spindle trees, the tree forms, several come from Europe. They're popular in Europe. This is an Asian one. And they're called spindle trees because the wood is very hard and is good for making spindles. It's real durable that way. So this Euonymus, it starts getting color pretty early in the season. It is definitely one of those that is daylight sensitive. When the days start getting shorter, this thing goes fall color, but it doesn't drop its leaves like a lot of trees. It will hold on to this color often through the end of December. So it'll go from like September through December with great fall color, starting off burgundy and getting brighter and brighter red. And then one day we'll come out here and most of these leaves will have fallen. It's not the easiest plant to get. It's not widely available. I did tell our volunteers who do seed collecting to collect a bunch of seed from it this year. After I wrote about it, I was like, man, it's been years since we distributed this. So let's grow some out so we can distribute again. But it's just a neat plant. And, you know, you can tell it's in one of the worst places right here at a parking lot, blazing sun, a lot of reflected heat during the summer, and does just fine. Any questions?
Can that do with less than full sun?
Yes, actually, the first time I grew it, a lot of people's first experience with the plant, a lot of botanic gardens, was the Arnold Arboretum for one year, for whatever reason, must have had, like, sown some seed and had every single one germinate, because they just wrote a bunch of botanic gardens and said, would you interested in any of these? And of course, yeah. And this was when I lived up in Virginia, and I planted one. I planted it at the botanic garden there, but I also planted one in my own garden, and it was pretty shaded, and it wanted to go more straight up than out like this, but it did the same thing. It turned burgundy, and in southeastern coastal Virginia, it was burgundy and then red through February. It almost didn't drop leaves at all until the new ones were coming out. We're gonna walk to it, but I wanted to point out from here so you can get the color. We've got these a few places in the garden. Is bald cypress. Our native bald cypress, Taxodium distichum. It's one of the deciduous conifers. There's several of those that appear here and in Asia, but this is our native one. And it gets this beautiful russet color. You know, if I say orangey brown, people turn up their nose, but I think it's a beautiful, beautiful color when you get the tree like that. We'll walk over to it and we'll talk a little bit more about this particular one. Taxodium distichum is native to the southeastern United States, mostly coastal areas, low-growing areas, wet areas. It's if you hear people talk about cypress knees, they're talking about Taxodium distichum or bald cypress, and those knees. There are various theories. I think the most common one now is that they help with oxygen exchange, because you don't typically get the knees unless the plant is growing submerged in water. If it's growing without water, you don't really get all those knees coming up from it. They're fast-growing trees, especially if given sun and moisture. They will grow very fast, very large. Because they grow in water typically, or at least some of the year in water, if not always in water, they're used to these very oxygen deficient soils. And so they actually are great for growing as urban trees because they will take severely compacted soils. They don't need all that oxygen in the soil that a typical plant does. And they usually don't form knees even with compacted soil. So who knows why. This is actually a cultivar called Peve Minaret. And if you look at online, or if you go to a nursery and you see this, you look on a tag, if it's an older tag, it'll say it grows 4 to 6 feet. If it's a more recent one, it may say 8 to 12 feet. This was planted here in 2002 or 2003. So in 20 years, it's gotten a bit bigger than you would expect. And it's not growing in a low area with a lot of moisture. This is growing right at the top of a hill where you'd plant something that wants to stay dry. You know, when it was planted, the thought was this was going to be this little pyramid right here, but never trust plant tags. They all lie, always. So it's a conifer, like a pine or spruce or anything like that. And it doesn't drop just its needles. It grows its needles on these little branchlets, and it drops the entire branchlet. You know, it's neither here nor there. It's just kind of interesting when people ask if this is a needle. It's not. It's a whole bunch of needles. And you can see it sets fruit. I've never tried to grow fruit out from Peve Minaret. There's a good chance that since this is a genetic dwarf, that you would get all kinds of different things if you grew out the seed from those little round cones. Questions? The comment was this one is still green up top, and typically deciduous trees start, you know, kind of from the top and outsides in changing color. And I'm not sure why that is with this tree. I don't particularly notice it on Taxodium in general. So I'm not sure what that is. I actually just got a text 15 minutes before I started this tour from Tim Nichols, who's one of the brothers who owns MrMaple.com, and Buckholtz Nursery, one of the larger wholesale places for Japanese maples. And he said, his text was, do you still have fall color on your Japanese maples? We don't have any fall color up here in the mountains between the cold and the flooding, and we've got to shoot some videos. So I said, yeah, that's actually one of the few things that we have good fall color on. So much of what you see as you walk around, if you see beautiful fall color, it's Japanese maples or close relatives. This is actually not technically what we call a Japanese maple, which is Acer palmatum, but this is a close relative. This is Acer sieboldianum, Siebold's maple. For all intents and purposes, it's a Japanese maple, and it's within that group of Japanese maples. This is Seki-no-kegon, and this is a form that is kind of weeping. Typically, Acer sieboldianum is much more upright tree form. This is this beautiful weeping thing, and this year most years has spectacular fall color. And that's, you know, here in the U.S., we go up to the Northeast to see the sugar maples. You know, that's the main thing we're seeing. We get good color from red maples. You know, there's a lot of that. One of our issues with maples here, especially our native maples, is for decades and decades and decades, all the market for plants has been in the top half of the country. You know, Chicago, New York, up that way. And so all the name selections, October Glory, can't come up with all the ones off the top of my head, have all been selected from really far northern forms because they want good cold hardiness. So they have good fall color up north. But actually sugar maples and red maples, Acer rubrum, grow all the way down, pretty far south, through North Carolina, down into Florida, and sugar maples kind of transform into another species down there, or subspecies. But there hasn't been a lot of selection of really good forms of southern shade trees, especially. So now, as all the growth in the country is coming from Raleigh and Charlotte and Huntsville, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia, there's a lot more attention being made to plants that may not grow well in Chicago, but will grow really well in the South. And that's a real change in what the big plant producers are doing. So where we used to have the big wholesalers on the West Coast say, yeah, that's a great plant, but it won't grow in zone 5. Now they're starting to look at things and saying, you know, zone 6B, 7, yeah, that's a good plant for us. So I expect to see a lot more of these southern forms. Takes a long time for shade trees to be evaluated and to be bulked up and get on the market, but expect to see a lot more of really good southern forms. So instead of going and getting October Glory, the same thing they're planting in Vermont, you'll go and, you know, get probably something that'll, you know, be like, you know, Southern Comfort or something like that. You know, they'll probably want to name it so you know it's from the South. What zone are we in right now? So we have typically said we're zone 7, 7B, the warmer side of zone 7. Recently, they just updated the USDA hardiness zone. So we are zone 8 now, which means we get to grow all kinds of plants we couldn't just a couple of years ago. So, but you know, that is a recognition of that. And for people who don't know, the zones are, the cold hardiness zones are based on the average annual minimum winter temperature. So the average annual minimum. That doesn't mean it can't go much lower than that, can't stay much warmer than that, but average annual minimum. And we tend to be fairly steady with that in maybe the high teens most years as a low. But, you know, one of these years we're going to get down to 5 degrees again and or lower, and we're gonna lose a whole lot of plants. Yeah, so the comment was this is getting a fair amount of shade from the tree above it. And the tree above it is a hackberry, and it's one that tends to lose its leaves pretty early. So this Acer sieboldianum gets those gets sunlight, those clear days fairly early. But in general, the Japanese maples as a group are pretty good about getting fall color in the shade. They are understory trees in the wild, and that's one of the activities in, you know, say October in Japan is to go momiji garu, which is maple hunting. People go up into the mountains with their cameras, cause big traffic jams, and they get out and they take pictures because it is amazing when you get out there. There are all these different colors, golds and oranges and reds and multicolors, and it's I mean, forget Vermont. It is amazing thing to see that. Difficult to get around, but it's amazing to see. And I'll take that over cherry blossoms any day. And so you can see different Japanese maples, got more red here, more yellowy orange here. This is another one of the Japanese maple type plants, not a true Japanese maple. Before we were looking at Acer sieboldianum. This is Acer pseudosieboldianum, and it's just got more of a rounded leaf than Acer palmatum, the traditional Japanese maple. But this is more of that typical growth for Acer sieboldianum and pseudosieboldianum. So I'll point out for those, this is not what I'm talking about, but I said you'll see a lot of Japanese maples around, great color. Some have barely turned, some are completely deciduous, but you should be able to see a Japanese maple from anywhere you stand at the JC Raulston Arboretum. That's part of our thing. You should always be able to see a Japanese maple. My kids, when they were young, used to try and trick me. Sometimes in the middle of summer when everything's leafed out, it can be hard to see them, but it's on the other side of that plant. You know, we tend in the South not to have as good fall color. One of the plants that I love for fall color is our native oak leaf hydrangea. Hydrangea quercifolia, quercus being oak leaf or oak genus. So this is just getting started. I was looking at some in the garden, some different selections. Some are really burgundy right now. Some have almost no color yet at all. Some are kind of in between, but these can get, typically will get dark burgundy is their main color. And they can get some highlights of oranges and reds in there as well. This is one we really like. It's called Turkey Heaven. Terrible name for a great plant. It was found on Turkey Heaven Mountain in Alabama. And we like it because for two reasons. One, it has these really dense flower heads. And these are small. These can be, football sized, and they are just dense as can be. There's a few other selections like that. The main one in the trade is called Harmony, which is another great plant. But you rarely see the growers in North Carolina growing oak leaf hydrangeas. They'll buy them and sell them out, and it's because under our high humidity and overhead irrigation, they get a bad leaf spot. And they're perfectly healthy. It doesn't hurt them at all, but they look terrible in the fall, and nobody wants them in the fall. And when I was really pushing this on some of the area nurserymen, saying this is a great plant, you should try it, a couple of them, humored me and took some cuttings and grew them out. And what they found was that growing this right next to Harmony, this had almost no leaf spot in the fall, and compared to Harmony, which was covered with it. And so they're looking at this as one that they can possibly produce here that isn't patented, that as far as a landscape plant, I think this is a little better than Harmony. I think it stands up better, but in the landscape, it's virtually the same thing for you or I growing it in the garden. But if you're growing it in the nursery and you have overhead irrigation on it, and this is a much better plant. Actually, in the landscape, ones that get more leaf spots sometimes have really good fall color, at least from a distance. Up close, they can be a little sketchy. How big does this get? So oak leaf hydrangeas can get 6 or 8 feet tall and 10 or 12 feet wide if they're allowed to go. I imagine this will get that large. I don't think there's anything dwarf about it, but the nurserymen have taken to this, at least some of them. And so we keep losing it to cuttings every year. So it hasn't, it's been pruned regularly. So, but I would guess it'll get typical size. It's certainly not a dwarf. All right, come back here. And I just want to, point out that fall color is not just on trees and shrubs. You can see around in here, there are some hosta that have great fall color. We don't have deer in here, so the hosta have leaves to have fall color. At my house, there are no leaves, so no fall color. But this is a Solomon seal, Polygonatum. This is one from Taiwan, Polygonatum sinensis, that we collected in Taiwan. But you can see this every year, it gets this beautiful gold color. And I really will, I'll leave it in the garden up and looking like this until the leaves drop and it's just these bare stems hanging there. Because I think that's beautiful. And a lot of the fall color in my personal home garden, I kind of concentrate things with good fall color outside my bedroom window, because in the mornings when I get up and I look out there, it kind of, it looks like I'm up in the Japanese mountains or something, because I have plants like oak leaf hydrangeas and these polygonatum and witch hazels and things like that that give me that great fall color, and Japanese maples, of course. Any questions? All right, we'll keep it on going. Okay, this guy's still a little bit early. This is one that is temperature, much more temperature dependent, but this is a Viburnum orientale. But it is very similar to a lot of the other deciduous viburnums, the arrowwoods, Viburnum dentatum, some of those. Our native, another one it's real closely related to actually, is Viburnum trilobum. Acer folium's close. Viburnum trilobum, which gets spectacular fall color. But most of the deciduous viburnums will get some degree of fall color, usually more burgundy than anything else, kind of real deep burgundy. And this I still expect to get some pretty good fall color. Viburnum orientale makes a large shrub. It'll keep going. It'll get 12 feet plus tall and as wide. White flowers in the spring, followed by red berries that'll turn black. It's not really fragrant as far as I can tell. I have a bad sense of smell, but it's not fragrant like some of the Korean spice viburnums and things like that. It'll grow in shade, but it'll be much more open, won't flower well, probably won't fruit for you. That's one of the nice things about some of our natives like Viburnum trilobum, the cranberry bush, and Viburnum acerifolium, the maple leaf viburnum. They tend to color up better in some shade. Any questions? Viburnums, fantastic plants. So, one of the real classic plants for fall color, one that I was so happy my neighbor put in, is Ginkgo. Ginkgo biloba, helps your memory, looks great in the garden. This is a little dwarf conchested one called Troll. It only gets 2 to 3 feet high, kind of like that Peve Minaret. We're a little bit late for it, but ginkgos are known for turning entirely gold, kind of all at once, and then pretty much all at once they drop all their leaves. It's kind of the perfect shade tree in that respect, because once they go, boom, they're all gone. You rake them once, boom, you're done. You can even leave them on the ground because they stay beautiful on the ground. Ginkgos are extremely primitive trees. They're actually closely related, or more closely related to conifers than they are to other typical broadleaf trees. Have that fan-shaped leaf. And you can get some variation in the leaf. This Troll often has this really wide leaf with 2 splits in it rather than 1, which is kind of neat. They are male and female plants. Female plants produce fruits they're technically fleshy cones, I guess, but for us, a fruit with a seed inside. The seeds are really tasty when they're I don't know, boiled or fried or something like that. They get kind of soft and they're delicious. The fruit, however, smells like, in literal sense, smells like a cross between vomit and dog dew. It is really one of the most unpleasant fragrances you will ever come across. So you always want to be careful you get a named selection, because any of the named selections that are being sold in the US are male selections. But you can come across some old ones where it was just a seedling that was grown out and they will be female. And you can get away with selling those because they don't fruit for, 5 or 8 years in the landscape. And so by then, if you're selling those like that, you're long gone. And I know about that because where I went to school at Virginia Tech, a whole parking lot was planted with seedling ginkgos. They eventually got rid of them, but you could see they all had different shapes and looked different, dense ones, real spindly ones, everything, but they would get just tons of that fruit on the ground. And it was right by where all the big donors parked for basketball and football games, is that closest parking lot. So they eventually cut those down and replaced them. I want to move on. Oh, any questions about this? Yes?
Are there any other conifers that have broad leaves like that?
Well, there are ones that, non-deciduous ones with nice broad leaves. Those are still typically pointed. So the question was, are there other conifers with broad leaves? So how deep a hole do you want to go? There's some plants in the podocarp family and agathis. We can grow nagia, which has a leaf about maybe an inch or more wide and comes up to a point. There are others like agathis, which can have leaves which are, almost 2 inches wide and quite long. They tend not to be hardy for us. And then there's Welwitschia, which grows in the Namibian desert and has very wide leaves, but it only has 2 of them. And it's the only plant where the leaf keeps growing year after year. And they don't stop. They just keep growing for centuries, perhaps. They don't grow fast in the Namibian desert, but they do grow. I can't think of any that have leaves that look like a deciduous or broadleaf tree that's a not conifer. The other ones can be unusual, but they don't look like anything else. So yes and no to your question. I want to point out that some of these deciduous rhododendron, this is Austrinium, the flame azalea, the Florida flame azalea, it can get some really nice fall color. And some of our best plants for fall color in this area in the south, some of our best shrubs are in the same family as rhododendrons and azaleas. You have things like Zenobia, which I don't know a common name other than Zenobia. And some of our blueberries, we're talking about our plants with benefits symposium. Blueberry is one of those ones where you get great fruit and you get amazing fall color on them. Nice flowers, they're not, showy. But so the Florida flame azalea typically has funnel-shaped, bright orange-red flowers. This is alba, so it has actually white flowers on the Florida flame azalea, but they make beautiful shrubs. I think they're gorgeous all year round. They get fall color, they go dormant, have really distinct shape. Then they flower in the spring, kind of disappear a little bit during the summer, but you got other stuff going on then, and then come back. And then finally, while we're standing here, got to point out this guy. He's kind of got the sun behind him, so it may be hard to see, but that is one of the Asian dogwoods, Cornus cusa. And this is a weeping form. Dogwoods, our native dogwood gets great fall color. Some of the shrubby dogwoods get really good fall color. And some of the Cusa dogwoods get really good fall color. This one is especially nice. And I really like when you get that kind of burgundy to the outer leaves and then more orangey gold inside. I think it's really spectacular. These weeping dogwoods are some of the awkwardest trees as young trees. They always look very stiff and not what you think of as weeping, beautiful weeping plants. But with some age like this, they can start becoming really beautiful things. So, Director of Horticulture here, Greg Page, we were talking this morning about what still had good fall color. Apparently there is a dwarf ginkgo on the rooftop that is peak right now. I didn't take y'all up there, but you can do that on your own. Greg said, you got to do a beech. You got to do the beech. I love beeches, the fall color on there. Some people hate this. They want the leaves to drop. They say this is brown. I think it's quite pretty if you look at it the right way. Sometimes like a lot of meadows, which, takes a certain aesthetic to appreciate them. But this is a kind of a common juvenility trait in beeches and in some other plants in that oak family, the Fagaceae family. They typically stop doing this for the most part as they get older. But young plants, you'll get this really nice kind of orangey tan color to them. So with beeches, almost every beech you'll see in landscapes is the European beech, Fagus sylvatica, the woodland beech, I guess. Here in the US, our native is Fagus grandifolia, the large leaf beech, I guess. So if you go out in the woods and you see beeches growing, they'll have that nice smooth bark. That's what, people like to carve their initials in, that kind of thing. Don't do that to our plant, please. And they make these upright, big, large headed trees. There are almost no cultivars, no selections of our native American beech. There are hundreds and hundreds of ones of the European beech. There's copper beeches, and purple beeches, weeping and contorted and variegated and all kinds of things. This was one that was found in Caswell County. I always want to say Chatham, but it was Caswell County by an Arboretum member. And she got in touch and said, you got to come see this. I went out and saw it. the person whose property it was actually on saw how excited I was. They said, well, dig it up because I'm going to kill it if it's out here in my woods by my deer stand where I drive my ATV. So we dug it up, we brought it back, and it has taken us a long time to figure out how to propagate it. It's a very specific type of grafting you have to do. It's called hot callousing, where you graft it and then you lay it down, and you have tubes with hot water or heat tape and insulation, and you cut the insulation, you lay the graft in there, and you have it, the whole building's cold, the plant's dormant and the rootstock's dormant, and it will graft that way. If you have that set up and know how to do it, it is apparently very easy to graft. We stumped really some of the absolute best grafters in the country trying to get them to graft this plant. And it wasn't until we had one of our members who volunteers some, but he's a real plantsman. He does a lot of grafting himself as just an enthusiast. He asked if he could get some signwood, and we said yes, and forgot about it. And then he came back with a tray of them. He's like, yeah, I had 100%. So we now know how to do it. It's getting people with the setup to actually do it is another thing, but I know somebody. So yeah, we're pretty excited about being able to get this out. And so this one, Fagus grandifolia, we named White Lightning because when it does drop all its leaves, the bark gets really silvery white in the winter, and it's got that kind of lightning look to it. So we really like this.
It's interesting there where it looks like it started to go vertical and then it went horizontal again.
Yeah, that's pretty typical of some weeping things. They'll go up a bit, and that's how they get bigger. The weeping dogwood that we were looking at before, it was staked to about this tall, and all the rest of that height it's gotten has been because it kind of grows up and mounds on itself. So as this grows taller and taller, we probably do some pruning underneath to open it up a little bit and really show off that form. But yeah, it's a very cool arboretum introduction, I think. And people love it and want it. We just got to get more of them propagated.
Could you point to something that would be considered good scienwood on that?
Sure. So good when I say scienwood, that means wood to graft on a rootstock. And the first key in grafting on rootstock is, in general, you want them to be about the same size. There are some methods of having a large rootstock and small scions. If you grew all Red Delicious apples and the market falls out for Red Delicious apples, as it rightly should, and you want to switch to Pink Ladies or Galas or whatever's new, you can cut your, just chainsaw through your apples, have that trunk, and go in there with what they call a split grafting tool. Basically, you're just splitting open the trunk, and you can put little thin branches in there. The deal is right inside the bark, there's what's called the cambium layer, and that's the active living part of the tissue. Very, very thin layer, but you have to have the cambium layer touching cambium layer, even if it's in that big thing. But when you're talking about like typical scienwood for grafting, what you generally look for is something a little smaller than a typical pencil is generally what it is. Again, depends a little bit on the rootstock. Some things, you grow from seed, and in that first year where you grow them from seed and then you're gonna graft the next year on there. Sometimes those are pretty chunky, and so you'll want something chunkier. But in general, you're looking for something around, in this range of size right here along my hands. And you want it from the current season's growth, with a couple of exceptions. And I'm forgetting it now. Somebody just told me a plant that's kind of tricky to graft, that the deal with that is you always want to go back to the previous season's growth for it. Which would be great information if I could remember what plant that was, or barring that, who it was who told me it, neither of which I can remember right now. And you can experience all that with our grafting class. And actually the person I know who I'm gonna have graft this program coming up that Blake did not mention, but in mid-February, we're gonna have a Friends of the Arboretum lecture about truffle production. It's a friend, a former nurseryman who started producing truffles and inoculated trees that are inoculated with the truffles to grow for homeowners or plantations, orchards, or whatever. Fascinating guy. This is going to be a great talk. So another plant that for some reason we've settled on a couple of species to be the only ones we grow is Hypericum, St. John's wort. And typically we see Hypericum calicinum, which is a ground covering woody plant. It spreads and sticks branches upright. There are a few other ones, shrubby ones that people grow, but there are literally dozens and dozens of these, both here in Europe a little bit and then in Asia. And they range from little herbaceous ground covering plants with little tiny leaves, little tiny flowers, to nice big shrubs. But they all have yellow flowers, and the flowers tend to be really pretty. Big open flowers with a big boss of stamens in the middle. There are some that grow in the sandhills of North Carolina that are really kind of tricky to grow. They're wispy and thin. We've offered those sometimes. Hypericum lysiflois is one of those, but there are other ones. This one is Hypericum, and I forget, laticepulum. Hypericum laticepulum. And this is one of the semi-evergreen, semi-deciduous forms. It usually loses its leaves for us, but kind of very late in the season, often in through midwinter, it'll really color up with burgundy and then drop its leaves. And it'll always drop its leaves when the new ones come out. Like most shrubby Hypericum, if it gets a little bit loose on you or too big, you can cut it back hard, let it flush back out. Typically, the Hypericums have really beautiful foliage, often blue-green, and really nice flowers. And if they have small flowers, they typically have just tons and tons of them, larger flowers, fewer of them, but either way, it's really showy. I love them. I wish we grew more of them. We've got some native ones growing around the garden here. We collected some of these in Uruguay. They really do, some species in Uruguay that were quite nice and little low plants. As people shift towards more native plants, often I think there's the Hypericums, there's a real there's going to be a lot to choose from our native ones, but it will take some selecting because there are a lot of nice species, but not all of the plants of that species are nice. You got to select ones with good form and good flower and good garden performance. Any other questions on this or other ones? All right. I'm going to leave it here. I could do a whole nother tour on the Japanese maples because they're all looking great this year. One of these days I'm going to do some talks. We're going to schedule 2 months, January and February, of plants that tolerate super freezing temperatures. So we have this nice warm winter all winter long because it always seems that way. But happy to answer any questions about anything else.
What is the difference between a botanical garden and an arboretum?
All right, what is the difference between a botanical garden and an arboretum? So a botanical garden is a documented collection of plants used for display, education, and research. An arboretum is a documented collection of woody plants, trees and shrubs for education and research. We are the JC Raulston Arboretum. We were founded as an arboretum. We are, really as much botanic garden as arboretum. We grow a lot of herbaceous material as well as woody plants. But you can go even further down that. There are places that are just pinetums, which just grow conifers, quercitums. I've been trying to convince the Dix Park here locally that they should have a quercitum because Raleigh is the city of oaks, and oaks grow, at least on the northern hemisphere, they grow around, Asia, Europe, Middle East, US, and they're an important tree everywhere. And we can actually grow most of the northern species. We can grow a lot of the southern species, even some of the almost subtropical ones. We can grow a lot of the dryland ones on the West Coast and in the Middle East. And so I'd really like there to be a quercetum there because it's both international, but it's all, part of the city of Oaks. So you can really go, kind of as narrow as you want, but it, in the end, it's that documented collection of plants that's being utilized.
Thank you.
Yep. Top 5 plants for the longest fall color. Well, that Euonymus carnosus, that is one. If you could keep it alive, and it's tricky, is Zenobia pulverulenta. Fothergilla is a great one, our native Fothergilla. Some Japanese maples, not all of them. Some last longer than others, and I wouldn't be able to tell you which ones specifically. And blueberries last a long time. Thank y'all all for being here.
Thank you.
Braving the cold. I thought I was going to be talking to myself. If not at the beginning, then by the end.